My name is Claire Donovan, Major General Claire Donovan, United States Army, age 38. I hadn't been home to Raleigh, North Carolina in 7 years, not since my father's funeral, where I stood in my dress blues unnoticed at the back of the church. The invitation to my younger sister Lauren's wedding at 29 arrived like a grenade wrapped in cream cardstock. Gold embossed, it read Major General Claire Donovan, not Claire, not sister, just my title, cold and formal. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from my mother, Patricia. Keep it civil. No, I miss you, no, come home. Just a warning, as if I were a liability. I stood in my office at Fort Bragg, staring at the invitation, the North Carolina wind rattling the window. 7 years of silence, no calls, no texts, not even a nod when I earned my second star after a near-fatal mission in Kandahar. My family had erased me, not with a fight, but with a calculated void. Lauren's wedding wasn't a peace offering, it was a stage, and I was cast as the inconvenient extra. 38, I'd faced war zones, but this felt like walking into an ambush. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Chapter 1: The Invitation. The envelope sat motionless on my desk for 3 days. Unopened, yet completely in control. It was a quiet challenge, a silent test of will. Every time I looked away, I felt it watching me, as if daring me to break first. And still, I didn't touch it. Captain Marcus Tate, my aide, noticed. Of course he did. 32 years old, from Georgia, with that steady calmness that made chaos feel manageable. We were in the middle of a briefing on troop deployments when he caught me staring. "You going, ma'am?" he asked, his southern drawl gentle, cautious, but not prying. Marcus always had this unnerving ability to see past my armor. He didn't need to ask what it was, he just knew. The envelope. The invitation. The past. I looked away, voice clipped. "It's not an invitation, Marcus. It's a summons." And that's exactly what it felt like. I hadn't spoken to my mother, Patricia, 62 now, or to Lauren, my younger sister, in almost 10 years. Not since I was 31. My father, Robert, had passed a year before that, when I was 30. And even then, even at the funeral, they managed to make me feel like a stranger. I remember standing stiffly by the coffin, dressed in full uniform. My bronze star sat like an accusation on my chest, polished, earned. And yet I might as well have worn nothing at all. Mom didn't look at me. She sat beside Lauren and her then-boyfriend, whispering, dabbing at her eyes, pretending I didn't exist. But if I'm honest, the silence didn't start there. It started long before the casket. It started when I chose West Point instead of pearls. When I said no to cotillions, to debutante teas, to everything my mother said made a woman respectable. Lauren never did that. She followed the script. Sorority life, charity events, handsome fiancé with a trust fund. All of it. She was the one who did things right. I was the deviation. The failure. The daughter who swapped high heels for combat boots. Who traded country clubs for barracks. Who didn't just walk away from the family path, but ran. I picked up the envelope again. The note inside had been brief. Keep it civil. Just that. A warning, maybe. Or a threat dressed in etiquette. That line stuck with me, keep it civil. Did they honestly believe I'd crash Lauren's picture-perfect event, medals clanging like a protest bell? Was that what they expected? Or was it something else? A way of saying, behave because you still don't belong here. You never did. My thumb traced the edge of the invitation, and with it, the memory of the last time I saw Lauren. I was 22. She was 19. We were in the kitchen. Mom had just whispered that I was too loud. Lauren had smirked. I remember that so vividly. That moment. That look. That phrase, too loud, as if the fire in me was a flaw, something shameful. As if commanding soldiers overseas made me unfit to speak in my own mother's house. I booked the flight to Raleigh not because I felt obligated. This wasn't about family loyalty. That cord had been severed long ago, frayed and burned beyond repair. No, this was something else. I needed to see if they still held power over me. If I had really broken free, or if I was still the daughter who secretly wanted their approval. I pulled out my dress uniform, the one with 2 stars stitched onto the shoulders now. It wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about pride, though God knows I'd earned it. I packed it because I wanted them to see me, to recognize the woman they'd tried to erase. They hadn't invited Claire, the little girl who colored outside the lines. They hadn't invited Lieutenant Claire or even Colonel Claire. But whether they liked it or not, Major General Claire Monroe would be walking through that door. And I wanted them to feel every ounce of the silence they had once buried me in. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I had survived them. And now I needed to know if I was finally immune. Chapter 2, Homecoming. Raleigh didn't welcome me. It regarded me with polite indifference, like a stranger showing up unannounced. The cherry blossoms, delicate and extravagant, lined the streets as if trying too hard to remind me that this was springtime in the South. The air smelled of honeysuckle and nostalgia, yet none of it felt like mine. I drove slowly through the old neighborhood, past the familiar white fences and clipped azaleas, and pulled to a stop in front of the Donovan house. Same colonial facade. Same white columns. Same brass door knocker shaped like an eagle, polished so bright it looked untouched by time. But to me, the house was no longer a place, it was a container. A curated display of a life I had been edited out of. I parked across the street and sat there, engine ticking, heart strangely still. The last time I'd been here, I was 30, wearing dress blues and a face of stone, saluting the flag as it was folded over my father's casket. Even then, Mom and Lauren had murmured about seating charts, whispering logistics through grief. Practicality had always mattered more than presence in this family. Now, 8 years later, I was back, not for a funeral but a wedding rehearsal. And somehow this felt harder. The dinner was to be held at the house. Not at a hotel ballroom or downtown bistro, but right there in the lion's den. That made it worse. Intimacy in this family wasn't warmth, it was exposure. Climbed the steps and knocked. The door opened. Mom stood there, still tall and immaculately put together, her auburn hair pinned with surgical precision. Her smile was taut, like it had been airbrushed on. "Claire," she said. Her eyes flicked to my uniform before landing back on my face. "Don't make a scene for Lauren. No hug. No, you're home. Just a reminder that my presence was conditional." I gave a short nod and stepped inside. The house smelled exactly the same, citrusy, clean, controlled. The lemon polish on the hardwood floors hit my nose with an odd kind of violence. I followed the hum of voices to the dining room, where the battlefield had already been set. 16 chairs surrounded the long mahogany table. My name card had been placed at the far end, closest to the kitchen, where the servers would bump past and the oven's heat would creep under my collar. I recognized the move. Subtle but deliberate. Displacement masked as decorum. The opposite end sat Lauren. 29 and glowing. Blonde hair styled in perfect waves, a designer dress that whispered wealth. She looked like she belonged in a bridal magazine spread. And beside her, of all people, Captain James Callahan. Jimmy, 30 years old. A pilot I had once mentored at Fort Bragg. He wore the same confident ease I remembered, but now softened by proximity to my sister. Our eyes met for a moment. There was recognition, and something like respect, but he didn't speak, just nodded slightly and turned back to Lauren. Mom took her place beside the bride-to-be, flanked by Aunt Susan, loud as ever, her laughter more performance than joy. Across from me, my cousin Emily leaned toward her date and whispered just loud enough to be heard, "I didn't know they let security guards eat with the guests." Table chuckled, knives clinking gently against bone china. No one corrected her. I felt the burn rise, not from the comment but from its predictability. I'd led platoons into combat zones, delivered eulogies for soldiers younger than Emily, stood in sandstorms and firefights, but nothing was ever enough to earn a seat at this table. I ate in silence, the clatter of cutlery louder than any conversation directed at me. The shrapnel scar on my left forearm itched under the uniform's fabric. A gift from Helmand Province, and yet not one person asked about it. Not one inquiry about my career, my service, my stars. Instead, Mom raised her glass. "To Lauren," she said, voice steady. "Your grace, your poise, your heart. You make us all proud." She didn't look at me. Not once. As if I wasn't even there. I chewed slowly, swallowed hard, let their absence of acknowledgement wash over me like incoming fire. Didn't hurt the way it used to. Didn't surprise me either. They hadn't changed. But I had. 'Cause this time I didn't flinch. I didn't shrink. I sat in my uniform, back straight, chest high, medals glinting beneath the chandelier. I had survived war zones more honest than this dinner table. And I would survive this too. Chapter 3: The Wedding. Carolina Country Club sprawled across manicured acres like it had something to prove, crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, waitstaff in black vests gliding through sunlight like shadows. It was the kind of place where reputations were cemented with flower arrangements and legacy was measured in centerpieces. 38, I'd stood in rooms with world leaders, brief generals in echoing halls beneath flags flown at half-mast. But this wedding felt more like a battlefield than any war zone. Not because of bullets, but because of memory. 'Cause of history. 'Cause every tablecloth and smile came laced with expectation. I arrived early, my dress uniform pressed, boots polished, stars aligned on my shoulders like silent bodyguards. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply showing up as myself. That was enough to be dangerous here. The seating chart was tacked beside the entrance like a tactical map. I found my name, C. Donovan, scribbled so small it might as well have been an asterisk. Table 14. Tucked near the service entrance, behind a pillar. My napkin, I noticed, was a slightly different shade of ivory. Not white. A quiet insult in linen form. Lauren passed me in a blur of lace and highlighter blushed cheekbones. Her gown clung to her like a second skin, sculpted and luminous, every curl in place. She paused just long enough to twist the knife. "I told them not to make it too military for you," she said with a razor smile. And before I could reply, she vanished into a storm of bridesmaids and camera flashes. Then came the toasts. Mom rose first, her champagne flute trembling slightly in the candlelight. "To family unity," she said, lips curled into a practiced smile that never once veered in my direction. She raised her glass. I didn't move. Then Lauren stood. Her voice was buttered with charm, honeyed for the crowd. She thanked the guests, the planners, Jimmy, the sunset. And then her tone shifted, playful and poisonous. "Even my big sister showed up," she said, pausing for effect. "Probably fresh from guarding some gate." Laughter erupted. It wasn't surprised laughter. It was ready. Like they'd been primed. Polished. Trained to laugh at me. I scanned the room, my face still. Some guests looked down into their glasses. Others chuckled without hesitation. My cousin Emily actually clapped. And then from my left, I heard it, Mom's voice, a stage whisper meant to pierce. She's always been the embarrassment. Table roared. Not one person flinched. Not one hand stopped mid-toast. Not one guest turned toward me with anything resembling discomfort or shame. But I didn't move. I didn't break. I stood. My chair slid back with a soft scrape that somehow cut louder than the laughter. I lifted my untouched glass of champagne. My voice was even, cold, clear. Trained. The people I protect, I said, outrank every soul in this room. Silence fell. It wasn't the volume. It was the gravity. The weight of history behind my words. The stars on my shoulders weren't decoration. They were earned. Paid for. Witnessed. My silence all these years hadn't been weakness, it had been restraint. For a beat, nothing moved. Then Jimmy stood. 30, he wore his uniform like a second skin, crisp and perfect. He didn't glance at Lauren. Didn't ask for permission. He crossed the ballroom, step by precise step, ignoring her frozen smile and our mother's warning hiss. He stopped in front of me, just one pace away. His spine straight, his salute sharp enough to draw blood. Major General Claire Donovan, he said, voice loud enough to carry beneath the chandeliers. My commanding officer. I owe her my life. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lauren's champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. She stumbled, heels catching the hem of her gown. And then she collapsed. The bride. The center of it all. Down. Mom rose too fast, her chair tipping. Her mouth opened in protest, but no one listened to her now. 3 more figures stood. Colonel Hannah Reed, retired, logistics, silver-haired and steady, saluted from across the room. General Marcus Powell, 60, steel-eyed, the man who had trained me at West Point, placed his hand over his heart. And then a woman I didn't recognize. She looked mid-40s, her dress simple, her eyes weary but fierce. She stepped forward silently and raised her hand to her brow. Her salute wasn't textbook. It was personal. They weren't doing it for applause. They weren't doing it for me. They were doing it for truth. In that moment, the room changed. The gaze shifted. Not to the bride on the floor or the mother clutching her pearls, but to me standing steady, unshaken. The woman they had tried to bury under shame, now towering above their scorn. My stars caught the chandelier light. My scars burned quietly beneath my sleeve. But it was my silence that echoed longest. Chapter 4, The Confrontation. The next morning was overcast, the kind of Carolina gray that settled into your skin like regret. I met my mother at a downtown Raleigh coffee shop, one of those refurbished spots with exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and overpriced lattes served in mismatched ceramic cups. The kind of place where uncomfortable truths were softened by foam art. Patricia Donovan was already seated when I arrived. 62, she still dressed like she was hosting a garden party for the governor, pastel blouse, tailored slacks, pearl earrings that matched the icy restraint in her posture. Her coffee sat untouched, but she stirred it anyway, the spoon clinking against porcelain like a nervous tick disguised as elegance. You made a spectacle, she said without preamble, her voice low and clipped. The headlines are a mess. I didn't respond. Just took a slow sip of my black coffee, no cream, no sugar, no pretense. The truth didn't need sweetening. She was right about the headlines, though. The video had gone viral overnight. Jimmy's salute, Lauren's faint, the slow-motion collapse of their curated illusion, it was everywhere. The general who silenced a wedding, they were calling me. Some blogs called it justice. Others called it drama. I didn't call it anything. I'd lived it. I wasn't prepared, Mom said, trying again. None of us were. I didn't let her finish. Lauren fainted because her lie fell apart, I said. My voice wasn't angry, but it was sharp enough to cut through her performance. And you let her mock me. You watched it happen. You laughed. Her lips thinned. Always a sign she was losing ground. We were protecting her moment. Her moment. I leaned back slightly. Or your narrative? I reached into my leather folder and slid it across the table. A plain manila envelope, inconspicuous in any other setting. But this one held ghosts, ones I'd been carrying quietly for years. Inside, a stack of declassified internal communications from 7 years ago. Anonymous allegations accusing me of falsifying mission reports during a Black Ops deployment. The fallout had delayed my first star for nearly a year. The language had haunted me, erratic, unstable, overly ambitious. But the phrasing, some of it was almost familiar. When I had the emails run through linguistic analysis last year, the report came back, 95% match to Lauren's writing style. The rhetorical flourishes? Patricia Donovan's signature phrases. It was like reading a duet in Betrayal. Her hand trembled as she reached for the folder, but she didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what was inside. You didn't just ignore me, I said, voice low. You tried to bury me. Mom's eyes welled, the first sign of real emotion I'd seen since I stepped off the plane. But she didn't deny it. Not a single word of defense. Just the quiet click of shame tightening her jaw. I thought you'd overshadow Lauren, she said finally, a whisper barely carried across the table. She was fragile. Still is. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, heart cold and steady. Fragile, I echoed. She forged a report that nearly ended my career. She sent the email. You gave her the words. That wasn't fragility. That was ambition, yours and hers. Silence spread between us like a spill, slow, creeping, irrevocable. Her hand hovered near mine, uncertain, hesitant, as if decades of distance could be bridged by a gesture. But it never landed. Her fingers curled back in. That was always the problem. She could posture, but never touch what mattered. I didn't want to lose you, she said, eyes glossy now. You were always fire, but hard to hold. You didn't lose me, I said quietly. You locked me out. Then you blamed me for knocking. I stood. There was nothing left to say. Closure wasn't about apologies, it was about clarity. I didn't need her tears. I didn't need her regret. I just needed the truth to be on the table between us, sitting there like the folder she still hadn't dared open. She stayed seated as I turned to leave. I didn't look back. Betrayal doesn't always come with a slap or a scream. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet signature at the bottom of a fabricated report. A whispered suggestion slipped into a daughter's ear. A faint smile at a dinner table while the room laughs at your expense. Sometimes betrayal comes dressed in pearls, sipping lattes, pretending it never picked a side. But I remember. And now so does she. Chapter 5, The Aftermath. I left Raleigh behind without ceremony, no goodbyes, no one at the gate. Just the hum of the airport, the cool anonymity of boarding in uniform, and a window seat with no one beside me. Felt appropriate. I flew north. Not back to Washington, not to any base or briefing room. I flew to Maine, to the edge of the map, where the Atlantic clawed at the rocks and the wind had no patience for pretenses. A cabin waited for me there, tucked against the pines along Acadia's coast. It had no internet, no TV, and no visitors unless you counted the occasional deer or the gulls that screamed like ghosts at dawn. I traded my uniform for flannel, my polished boots for worn hiking ones. I let the cold Atlantic air cut through the last of what I had been carrying. Not anger, not grief, just the heaviness of expectation. 38, I was done performing for a family that had never clapped. Done saluting a silence that never saluted back. Pentagon reached out 2 weeks later. A seat had opened on a new ethics board, a symbolic gesture perhaps, a nod to the scandal I'd survived and the integrity I'd refused to surrender. I didn't even hesitate. I declined. I'd had enough of rooms where my presence was conditional. Instead, I created something of my own. I founded the Valor Network, a nonprofit built for soldiers like me, not just the battle-worn but the soul-bruised. Veterans who hadn't just been wounded by war but by betrayal. Spouses who leaked secrets to the press. Siblings who forged documents. Parents who silenced. We built a database of stories, resources, and referrals. We didn't just help people rebuild their careers, we helped them rebuild trust. It was the hardest kind of rehabilitation because it didn't involve physical therapy or medals. It involved memory and truth. Words spread quietly. Not viral this time. Not dramatic. Just one story after another passed like handshakes across time zones. We weren't loud. We were deliberate. And I finally felt useful again. Months passed. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, just soft cursive on cream-colored paper. Kind mom favored. I read it standing in the doorway of the cabin, the ocean behind me, the wind cold on my cheek. Claire, I saw your CNN interview. I didn't know how high you'd risen. I wish I'd seen you. Mom. I folded the letter once, then again, then slid it into a drawer beside some old deployment photos. Not out of anger. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I finally understood what it meant to choose myself. She had seen me. Every day. Every year. Every chance to stand beside me and didn't. She had chosen Lauren. Over and over. And now she had to live with the echo of what she'd ignored. I woke early most mornings in Maine. Not because of alarms or duty, but because the sun demanded it. I chopped wood. I hiked the cliffs. I rebuilt the muscle memory of peace. One foggy morning, while I was repairing a cracked window frame, a local boy showed up. 15 maybe, shaggy-haired and barefoot despite the chill. He held out a plastic container of fresh blueberries, grinning. "My mom said you were a general," he said. I wiped my hands on my jeans and gave a small smile. "Still am," I said. "But now I'm just Claire." He nodded like that made perfect sense, then ran off down the path, his laughter trailing behind him like wind through pine. I stood for a while, watching the sea. It wasn't gentle. It was wild, unapologetic, endless. Just like I wanted to be. Just like I had fought to become. There had been a time when silence felt like exile. When the absence of my mother's voice, my sister's validation, felt like proof I had failed. But now it was different. Now the silence felt like freedom. Conclusion, finding my shore. The Maine sunrise spills gold across Acadia's cliffs, painting the ocean in hues that don't ask for permission to shine. 38, I stand on my cabin's porch, barefoot, a mug of black coffee warming my hands. The salt air carries no expectations, no whispered judgments. For the first time, I'm not Major General Claire Donovan, not the daughter who failed to fit, just Claire, whole, unapologetic, free. The viral video of Jimmy's salute at Lauren's wedding, now at 5 million views, didn't change me. It just showed the world what I'd always known. My worth was never theirs to define. I didn't give the press the statement Mom wanted. I didn't need to. That salute, those stars on my shoulders, said enough. Pentagon's offer, a chair on their ethics board, came and went. I chose the Valor Network instead, pouring my scars into a mission for soldiers like me, betrayed by those they trusted most. Every email we get, every soldier we help, feels like rewriting the story I was handed. My mother's letter sits unanswered in a drawer. She wrote, "I didn't see you." But she did. She just chose not to look. I don't hate her. I've just learned to love myself enough to walk away. This morning, a local girl, maybe 16, dropped off a basket of wild blueberries. "You're the general, right?" she asked, eyes wide. I laughed. "I'm just Claire now," I said. She grinned and darted off, her laughter echoing like a promise. The ocean hums below, steady, vast. It doesn't care about my rank or my pain, and that's why I stay. Silence used to be my family's weapon. Now it's my sanctuary. 5 lessons I've learned. Your worth isn't their verdict. My family tried to erase me, but my value wasn't theirs to judge. Your strength comes from within, not from their applause. Silence can speak louder. I didn't shout at that wedding. I stood, spoke, and let my truth do the talking. Sometimes quiet resolve outshines their noise. Choose your battles, not theirs. I could have fought Mom and Lauren, but I chose peace over their chaos. Pick fights that build you, not break you. Honor those who see you. Jimmy's salute, those officers' respect. They reminded me that chosen family can outweigh blood. Cherish those who lift you up. Rebuild from your ruins. Their betrayal tried to bury me, but I built the valor network from those ashes. Your pain can become your purpose. If this story hit you, maybe you felt erased, maybe you've stood tall anyway, drop a word below. Just one. Here works. I'll read them all. You're not alone in your silence, and I'm glad we found each other. If my journey resonated, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to my channel for more stories of grit and grace. Let's keep building a community where no one's invisible. Thank you for staying with me.